everybody, my name is Shibby. I'm an esports colorcaster and Celestial ranked player in Marvel Rivals, and we are nearly 2 weeks into the new season of Marvel Rivals, season 2.5, and I want to give you my list of the best tanks to play so you can win more games and climb through the ranks. Now, I know it's been tough for my Vanguard brethren who have been trudging along in this new season against flyers, against stuff like Punisher. It has been rough. But don't you worry, there are still picks in the game that will allow you to put the team on your back and carry yourself through the ranks. But before we get into this list, if you enjoy the content, please like, comment, subscribe. Every little bit helps. I've really been enjoying all the love I've been getting recently on all my videos. I appreciate every single one of you, but I don't want to keep you waiting any longer, so let's just get into it. Let's start with the best tank in the game, and that's going to be Magneto. I think Magneto has been the biggest winner of this new meta, and quite frankly, his bubble is one of the best pieces of utility that a tank can have in this game. Out of all the Vanguards, I think bubble is one of the most OP abilities, simply because of the flexibility in its use cases, and when paired up with Emma Frost and that new team up that she has with him, you can actually bubble both yourself and Emma or another individual, which is really, really good. You can essentially have two bubbles going out at once that allows you to block a ton of damage. When you put it on your DPS players, it allows them to play more aggressively. When you put it on your tanks, whether you're paired up with an Emma Frost, a Hulk, a Doctor Strange, whoever, it's almost always really good because it allows you to push forward and take more space. I think Magneto, his kill combo is very good. He's really good at finishing off individuals that DPS get really low. If you've ever played Magneto with like a Star-Lord or a Black Panther or any sort of dive character, Magneto just enables them so well. Even when you play it with more of these long-range DPS characters or maybe mid-range DPS characters, Magneto plus Punisher allows the Punisher to play more aggressively, run in. Like, the bubble in of itself is such a big catalyst in how the game and how the tempo of the game is going to be played from the Magneto side. Good bubble usage can make or break certain games here. And why I think Magneto's so good is, on top of having that bubble, he's also got a very good shield, right? It's not gated by any sort of damage like Doctor Strange or Emma. It is just on a flat cooldown that recharges, and most Magnetos know how to play around that shield timing very, very well. You can use natural cover when it's down to regain the shield charge. You also can pop it early if you feel like you need to block a big ability or you need to block a lot of damage, especially with stuff like Punisher, Hela, Hawkeye, all these mid to long range DPS characters being more meta at the moment. That shield allows you to soak up a ton of damage for free. You don't give ult charge. You don't have any, there's no drawbacks to it. I feel like Magneto as a tank has very few drawbacks. He's very good at dealing with dive if you ever have to play against that. Bubble, again, very good. We can use it defensively, as I mentioned, offensively before. Defensively, you can throw it on your supports. You can throw it on somebody that's getting low, especially if they get choke slammed by Emma or if they're CC'd by Eye of Agamotto, stuff like that. Bubble is very good in that regard. You also can deal with flyers relatively well. Yeah, you're not the best, don't get me wrong, but your left clicks and your right clicks can hit flyers out of the sky and can potentially kill them if you can land the left click, right click, left click combo, that burst combo that you have. It is very, very lethal, and it's really hard to deal with because of the angles you can take. So I think Magneto, by far, best tank in the game right now. If you're not playing him, you should be, because he will just win you more games than you're supposed to. Let's talk about the next best tank in the game, and someone I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Magneto. It is going to be Emma Frost. I think she's also been a big winner of this new meta or this new season. Her range of her laser beam being increased from 15.5 to 18 meters allows her to both deal with flyers and do more damage at a higher effective range. It can actually zone and push people off a little bit better, right? Think mid-range DPS, things like Winter Soldier, Punisher, maybe, characters that you couldn't previously reach as consistently. Now with that new beam range, allows her to put a lot of pressure onto those mid-range DPS or some of those supports that play a little bit closer to their team. Think Invisible Woman, sometimes, so like Luna Snow if they have to position a little bit more aggressively. Emma Frost can actually punish that or actually put a lot of damage onto those individual heroes more consistently. I think the diamond form changes, yeah, it does kind of suck, but you still can do what you were supposed to do last time, right? You can still CC up divers. You can still choke slam stranges. You can do everything you need to do. You just need help from your team. And most of the time when I'm playing in like Grandmaster Celestial lobbies, anytime they see me grab a tank or grab somebody, they're going to be dead before the animation is finished. And even if the chokeslam animation finishes, I can kick them, and most of the time they will die. So Emma Frost, still very good. I think her ultimate is a very, very good ultimate. The range is absolutely busted. You can bait out support ultimates. I think trading Emma ultimate for something like a Luna Snow or a Loki copied Luna Snow or Invisible Woman ultimate, I think trading Vanguard and support ults is generally a net positive play for your Vanguard, especially with this Emma Frost, who can build that ultimate up relatively quickly as long as you're keeping your beam at relatively high charge, 70, 80 plus and above. Obviously 100 is ideal, but you can't really get that consistently. The other thing, a small unnoticed change that happened that actually makes her, I think, better than Groot is the fact that now she charges her beam off of Groot walls, which I don't think a lot of people understood. I think that was the original intention last patch, but maybe something was bugged. But now Loki clones, lamps, pretty much everything that is like an object or like Namor squid, stuff like that, she can keep her charge up and keep her charge going longer, which actually makes her really lethal when she's at that 100 charge rate. This is really disgusting, the amount of burst she can do, the amount of damage she can pull out within a quick couple seconds. So yeah, Emma Frost, very good. Team up, solid with Magneto, solid with Psylocke. I just think she brings so much to the table as a tank. So if you're not playing Magneto or if Magneto's banned out, most of the time you should be defaulting to Emma Frost. Probably one of the surprises on this list is I have Doctor Strange as one of the next best tanks in the game behind Magneto and Emma. Now, if I were to put Emma and Magneto to S tier, I would probably put, Doctor Strange at like the top of A tier. I actually have him above Groot for a multitude of reasons. I think the Maelstrom of Madness change where the damage fall off is gone and he could just kind of do full damage. That actually allows him, like I mentioned, to gamble for multi-kills more with his Eye of Agamotto. Now you can hit 2-3 man Eye of Agamottos, and if you have a fully charged Maelstrom of Madness, you'll most likely get 1 to 2 kills guaranteed. It's very nice. That change was much needed for him to kind of increase his lethality. The way I view Doctor Strange is that he has like a bubble or a circle, and if you enter that circle or if you enter that bubble, you are prone to dying, and he can kind of push that forward with his shield. Now his shield obviously not as good as I think Magneto, but can deal with some of that mid to long range poke that we see, stuff like Hela, Winter Soldier, Punisher that has been picked up pretty consistently. You have ways to deal with it with your Doctor Strange shield. It's not as sturdy, it can get broken, which can leave you pretty vulnerable, but I think he does far better into what's meta at the moment than stuff like Groot, who would, most people would put him as the third best tank in the game. I think Flyers being a little bit more prominent, him having the ability to sometimes deal with Flyers, right? You can fly up in the sky, float, maybe pressure them, especially if supports aren't really consistently looking at Flyers. He has ways to deal with that kind of stuff. The utility Doctor Strange brings into the game with his portal is unmatched, right? When I said Bubble is probably one of the best abilities for Vanguards in the game, I think Portal is probably second or third best for Vanguards because of the amount of plays you can make. I expect Doctor Strange to kind of stay pretty consistently behind Magneto and Emma this patch, unless some sort of hot fixes come in where he gets buffed and those two get nerfed, but still a very solid tank. I love watching Doctor Strange paired up with stuff like Magneto, like Emma Frost. You can even pair him up with Penny or something like the Thing if you want. I think he's a pretty solid tank, he especially rises obviously if Magneto and Emma get banned. So I would definitely recommend playing Doctor Strange if you feel like you need a little bit more shield tank, if there's too much poke, or if you want the utility of Portal and you've got some crazy combos with like the Punisher turret, or you can give your Hela or your mid-range DPS access to high ground or, behind the enemy team. So definitely play more Doctor Strange. I think he's very good this season. Now, Groot is an interesting conversation because I know a lot of people still have him as one of the best tanks in the game, probably behind Magneto or Emma, or sometimes they even have him above Emma Frost at the moment. But I think the Groot nerfs actually ended up affecting him a lot. It was that on top of the other heroes in the game that got buffed. Prominently, Punisher getting buffed with more damage onto his rifle. The walls are going down quicker. Like Groot before, definitely if you wanted to face off against him, you pretty much had to run Punisher plus Rocket Raccoon, and the infinite ammo would just shred his walls. But now that you can just run Punisher by himself with the increased damage on his gun, the increased cooldown on his wall, specifically his iron wall, when those walls go down, his tankiness, his survivability actually takes a big hit for the next 12 seconds. Walls are still very good. It does warp the way the game is played. He still can output a ton of damage pretty consistently. Groots are some of the highest DPS tanks in the game, sometimes out DPSing other DPS on the team. On top of his ability to block damage, you can block some ultimates, or you can, kind of be annoying, right? You can block stuff like Iron Man ultimate if you're fast enough. You can definitely cut off field of vision or line of sight for stuff like Luna Snow ultimate, you know, even stuff like Invisible Woman ultimate. You can wall people out. I think he has really good combo ability with his ultimate. That's never going to change, especially with stuff like Moon Knight, Winter Soldier, Storm, Iron Man, all these different DPS that are kind of in the meta at the moment. Groot pairs up very well with naturally. I do still think he struggles with the mid to long range poke and some of the flyers in the game. His arms do have pretty solid length, but you can just kind of outspace him. And the issue with Groot is that he sometimes just takes too much damage before he's allowed to set up his walls. And if you can consistently knock down his iron wall, you'll notice that he's a lot more vulnerable and his tankiness goes down pretty consistently. He is at some points, sometimes a walking ult charge or ult battery for DPS like Punisher or Winter Soldier and stuff like that. So it can be kind of tough to play him. Not saying he's bad by any means, but the nerfs that actually happened to him, thank God, actually knocked him down a peg. And I don't even see myself regularly banning a Groot, even if they are like Lord or really, really good. There are tools in the game now with the changes that have happened in patch 2.5 or season 2.5 that allow you to deal with this character more consistently. Now, this placing is probably going to shock a lot of people. I have Hulk actually as like a top 5 tank in the game right now, which is really interesting. I don't know how many people have him that high. I know people have been putting like Captain America and sometimes Venom above him, but I actually think Hulk, now that he's been like consistently released from Hulk jail, which is where he's just been pretty much was always banned when the Gamma team up was available with both Namor and Iron Man. I mean, he was just banned out super consistently. Now that he's only teamed up with Namor, people have been more frequently letting this guy slip through the ban phase. And honestly, I just think there's not enough Hulks to really understand for the player base how good he is. I think Hulk Namor, very good combination. The buffs that happen to Namor are really good. Allows him to kind of play a little bit more aggressively, fish for more ultimates because of that increased range, both on the outer ring and the inner ring. But Hulk as a character, I think as simplistic as his playstyle is, where he's jumping in and beating up people, he matches up and pairs up very well with Magneto. Now, obviously, one of Hulk's biggest counters in the Vanguard tank pool is Emma Frost. But even then, if you are playing like Magneto Hulk into Magneto Emma Frost, there are multiple ways for you to outplay that duo and get the value you need, which is harassing the backline, potentially killing them. Hulk has essentially 2 bubbles unlocked to him when he's paired up with Magneto. Magneto's bubble and his own Gamma shield. Hulk definitely, you know, struggles into stuff like Punisher, into stuff like Winter Soldier. They can shred him in the same sense they can shred stuff like The Thing or Groot or Penny. But I think his mobility in the fact that he can just kind of jump in, jump out pretty consistently, and the fact that he has the isolation mechanic where he can EU and you get exiled. He's also decent at dealing with flyers. I'm not saying you're picking Hulk to deal with flyers, but the fact that he has that in his kit, or the ability to deal with flyers in his kits, is why I kind of have him so highly rated. I think in Grandmaster Celestial, I have seen a lot of Hulk players take over the game when I'm playing Magneto. The added shield, the added ability to get more aggressive, a lot of Hulk players understand what they need to do with him. And the Gamma team up, albeit losing Iron Man and only having Namor, is still very good. I have seen a lot of comps where it's like Magneto, Hulk, Namor, and you have like Luna Snow, Invisible, and you pair that up with like a Punisher or some sort of, you know, aerial DPS. And they roll games. It is very tough for people to deal with Hulk players, especially if you're playing these perceived counters and you're not actually playing around all these interesting cooldowns. Like Emma players will take it for granted, be like, oh, the moment this Hulk jumps in, I'm gonna choke some, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. But if he's getting bubbled, if he's using his own bubble, he's using his util very well, it's very difficult to deal with a good Hulk player. And I think there are a lot of good Hulk players out there in Grandmaster Celestial. So if you can master this character and you can pair that up with a Magneto, I think he's very good, which is why I have him kind of so high in the meta at the moment, because of the amount of damage he can output. Even in his ultimate form, if you get good at juggling, you hit the combo where it's like a regular melee attack, right click, grab, you can 100 to 0 a lot of characters in this game. So I have Hulk pretty high. I think he's just outside of that A tier list. He maybe be top of B tier, if not towards the end of A tier. Another tank that I have kind of flipped the script on in terms of narrative wise, I actually think Penny is pretty good. Now, Penny struggles a lot offensively. Don't get me wrong. It is very hard to retake a point, or if you're playing control point, if you lose, it's very hard to go back and get what was yours. But on the defensive side, on convergence maps specifically, and on some pure payload maps, Penny absolutely dominates with that Rocket team up. And the fact that Rocket isn't being consistently banned out and Penny isn't being consistently banned out, the ability to lock down complete parts of the map is really, really tough for players to deal with, right? Not just talking about dive and how good Penny is into dive, but the fact that you need to expend multiple resources to clear out certain parts of the map because of the nest coverage that she has, the mine coverage that she has. It actually takes a lot of time. It wastes a lot of time if you're playing stuff like Convergence or Payload. So I was originally very low on Penny, or I was like, oh, she's only just going to do what she does even better. But recently we have been seeing some compositions in some of the higher levels of play running Penny on control point, where you portal her onto the control point, you get her to the control point first, you allow her mines to be set up, you allow her to set up her webs, and it's really hard for the other team to kind of walk in on the control point, because most of the time it's not that big, right? Your nest will cover 35 to 50% of it, and then you can kind of cover some of the choke points with mines. You can get free kills with mines. Yeah, I've definitely changed my tune on Penny, and I think the fact that she is so dominant on those defensive sided maps, or those maps where you can, play the defensive side, Convergence and Payload, the fact that she's even more oppressive actually bumps her up a little bit more in my tier list. And, it's no surprise that I think she's one of the highest win rate tanks in the game at the moment across all the ranks for sure. And that obviously the lower ranks kind of inflate that a little bit because of how tough it is for them to deal with her. But I think overall, she's just gotten a lot better. And if you're one of those Pennies that's really good at canceling ultimates with your web, you're really good at catching people that are diving in, right? Think like Doctor Strange, if you can cancel his ultimate. Think about, stuff like Groot, Hulk. I mean, even onto Emma and Magneto, if you can consistently land those webs, it really disrupts the flow of the game, which is where, Penny's best at. Disrupting the flow and making you do things that you don't want to do because you have to deal with her. My next tank here, I'm actually going to put is Thing. Now, I know there's been mixed opinions about Thing simply because of how bad he kind of is into the meta at the moment, with mid-range and poke DPS being very prominent, also flyers being very prominent. But I still think Thing is better than stuff like Captain America and Venom. I rarely find myself asking for Captain America and Venom, whereas like we can almost always guarantee value with a Thing. I'm a big Thing player myself, but I've also seen a lot of things get value out of playing into stuff like Magneto, Doctor Strange, or sometimes like Magneto, Hulk. Obviously, he is still kind of, big countered by Emma, who has the ability to burst her down, can still choke slam him, can't kick him, but can still choke slam him, which is very tough, because once you're choke slammed or once you're in that animation, you can take a ton of damage. But I think if you're cycling his abilities correctly, you're using his survivability, if you're paired up with something like an Invisible Woman who's very prominent in the meta at the moment, right? You have that Fantastic Four team up going. You have ways to get value out of the Thing, and you can really put a lot of pressure onto Magneto, onto Doctor Strange, who you kind of invalidate their shields. I'm not saying you completely counter it, because it doesn't really matter. They're still probably going to be shielding range DPS damage, but the fact that you can kind of just put that extra layer of damage, build your ultimate up, again, trading Thing ultimate for something like a Luna Snow or an Emma Frost, or Invisible Woman, or like a Loki cloned or copied Luna Snow or Invisible Woman ultimate, that's a net positive trade in my mind because of how fast you can build up that ultimate. Also, the ability to give your frontline damage reduction and your backline damage reduction potentially, right? You E onto them, you can give your supports a little bit more damage resistance, or you can play with your frontline and push that envelope a little bit more. I think Thing is a lot better than most people are willing to admit. He does struggle in this meta, don't get me wrong, but I think he is fundamentally better than Captain America and Venom. Now, I think, funnily enough, one of the biggest 180s that we've seen in regards to this tank is the fact that Captain America has fallen so much lower. Yes, he did receive those nerfs, but it's the rise of all the other DPS in the meta at the moment that make it really tough for him to play, right? Obviously, Emma also being meta makes the game really tough for something like a Captain America, a dive-oriented tank, tough to play. You also have Hulk Namor coming in, who's really good at dealing with Captain America. Like, it was unironically a perfect storm of both Captain America nerfs and heroes in Marvel Rivals being buffed for season 2.5 that have kind of put this character, or put this hero, much lower in people's minds. I think Captain America, still a very good backline nuisance, really good at being annoying, but the fact of the matter is that you can kind of just ignore a Captain America for most of the part, especially if your supports are paying attention to each other, or as long as one person is kind of putting damage into him, or if, you know, Emma Frost is laying into him with the choke slam into kick combo. Most of the time you can kind of ignore Captain America. And the fact is, you will most likely win your frontline battle, because almost all the time this Captain America is not playing with their front line. So you have a 5v6 up there, and the fact that you can just kind of push that forward, push that line, that tank line forward with stuff like Emma Magneto or Magneto Hulk, who just, I think, does better in that regard for diving. I think it's really tough for Captain Americas to get value. Even some of the best Captain Americas I've seen, like Lord Captain Americas, I think they are really struggling in this meta because mid to long range DPS are prominent. Namor Hulk is still very good. You've got flyers in the meta, stuff like Iron Man, Storm, who can kind of farm him for free. And I think his damage profile and the fact that, you know, his survivability got hit a ton with the changes and the nerfs that he got in season 2.5, he's a lot more vulnerable of a character. So when you actually have the tools to deal with him, which there are plenty at the moment, he does go down more consistently. I am seeing Captain America's die more consistently. And honestly, his ultimate is very underwhelming. Yes, it's very good for stalling point, but your team has to actively follow that Captain America trail, which will then give them that bonus HP, which is kind of tough, especially if he's like running and jumping around everywhere. And it kind of puts your team in a more compromised spot. I'm not saying he's like terrible or bad, but the fact of the matter is that Captain America just got hit with a 1-2 combo of nerfs plus buffs to other characters that has definitely made his playstyle struggle the most. Another tank I have on this list who's going to be the second to worst tank in the game is going to be Venom. I know this guy also has mixed opinions. There are a lot of players that still think Venom is very lethal, who still has a really good combo. I never find myself asking for a Venom, right? I'm never like, man, to deal with X character, we have to play Venom here. Now, there are some goated Venoms. Obviously, people like Andrew and some of the people I see in like Celestial and Grandmaster. There are some very good Venoms, but there are just too many tools to deal with him. And there are just so many heroes in the game that he just can't do anything about. Venom can't do anything about flyers, point blank, period. Can't do anything about Iron Man. Can't do anything about Storm, Ultron, nothing like that. Oh, okay, maybe you want to play him into more of the mid to long range DPS. Well, he gets shredded by Punisher, who's just going to lay into him. Winter Soldier does really good because he has the ability to interrupt him, grab him. Even that extra overhealth, you can interrupt. The supports in the game right now are very good at dealing with him. Loki, obviously, clones, and then the totems are very good at dealing with Venom. Now that Luna Snow gets extra HP when she freezes you, and the fact that her clap also always has given her HP regen, it is really tough for you to get your kill combo off. Like Venom is in my opinion probably just the worst Captain America. Maybe a little bit controversial, but I think both of those guys just are super tough to play in the current landscape without having a ton of help, right? And you could argue, okay, I mentioned you know, Magneto and Hulk are very good. What about Magneto Venom? Sure, Magneto Venom, fine combo, increases his survivability, but you're not going to get that much more lethality out of it, right? And the fact that you can get stunned out of your shield, or your, not shield, but your overhealth mechanic, the fact that you have to pretty much rely on your swing not getting interrupted because there's so many tools in the game that can interrupt him at the moment, interrupt him out of that swing, it's really tough. Whereas like Hulk, his jump is on a relatively low cooldown. You've got a lot more survivability with both Magneto Bubble and your own Gamma Bubble or your Gamma Shield. Yeah, I would much rather have Hulk as my dive DPS or dive-oriented DPS than something like a Captain America, something like a Venom. So I feel for Venom players. It's really tough because we swapped over to a meta that was more favorable to dive. I'm not going to call it a full dive meta, but where we're in a meta where dive was a little bit more playable, into now all the DPS that we see, all the different combinations of tanks and heroes and supports, I just find it tough for Venom to get value. Without a surprise, probably the worst tank in the game is Thor. The changes that they made to him didn't actually help him at all, unfortunately. You know, Thor is just in a really tricky position because he's one of the only tanks in the game that has purely selfish abilities, right? He has nothing for his team. He doesn't get too much overhealth. He can't be really a bullet sponge. He doesn't really have any shields. He just doesn't provide anything to the team as a whole. So if you're picking Thor, you're essentially picking a very tanky duelist. You're picking a very selfish Vanguard. And granted, like I said, you can pair him up with stuff like Magneto. You can potentially pair him up with double dive compositions, or if you see like Magneto and Strange, you can play him. But the fact of the matter is he gets absolutely torn up by flyers, gets absolutely torn up by the mid-range DPS that are prominent at the moment. Think Punisher, Winter Soldier, stuff like Squirrel Girl. I mean, I feel like Thor has been one of the biggest losers of season 2.5, despite the changes that he got to his kit and to his hero. They just not enough. They need to give him either some sort of utility to allow him to be played more in a team cohesion effort, or they hyper index into the side of him being like a very selfish tank and just give him more tools to isolate and duel people and win those 1v1s. Because in those situations, Thor is very good. It's tough. I just think they might need to do a complete rework, or maybe a kit rework similar to what they did with Jeff, before anybody's seriously thinking about playing Thor. Because even if you could get his Thor force faster, you're not really getting too much value out of it. Like, if I want a range tank, I'd rather play Emma. I'd rather play Magneto. If I want a melee tank, I'd rather play Hulk. I'd rather play Thing, Captain America. Both sides of the coin that Thor does. Yes, he has access to both forms, but the fact of the matter is that he does those forms kind of at a adequate level. He doesn't really do it really amazingly, right? He's a kind of a jack of all trades, but he's not better than Magneto at range. He's not better than Emma at range, and he's not better at melee than somebody like Hulk, like Venom, like Captain America, or Thing. His mobility isn't as good as Hulk. His mobility isn't good as Captain America or Venom. Like, it's really tough for me to justify ever in a spot I want Thor right here versus all the other tanks in the game. That's gonna do it for my list for the best tanks to play in season 2.5 of Marvel Rivals. Let me know if you guys agree with this in the comment section below. If I rated certain tanks too high, or if I rated maybe somebody like Thor too low, let me know. I try my best to respond to every comment on my videos. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'm going to tell you something you've heard a million times before. Like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications on my latest uploads. I try and respond to every single comment in my video because I genuinely do appreciate everyone that takes the time out of their busy schedules to leave one, and I love interacting with my community. If you want to catch more longer form content, I stream over on Twitch about 3 to 4 times a week, where you'll get unedited versions of these videos, as well as we talk about roster moves, patch changes, as well as gameplay over there. If you care about the short form side, I post pretty frequently on YouTube Shorts and TikTok, where you'll get more condensed version of this content, as well as highlights from my stream, amongst other things. I'm also on Twitter, and all of this will be in the description box below, as well as a pop-up that will form on the right side where you can catch me on all the different platforms. I genuinely appreciate everyone that stops by on this channel and watches all my videos, and I hope to see you in the next one.